Hello and welcome back to the channel where I'm again joined by Conor McKenna, and we're going to be doing a wee bit of a preview on this weekend's All-Ireland Gaelic Football Senior Championship semi-finals. We've got two games, one on Saturday, one on Sunday. We've got Cavan and Dublin on Saturday and Mayo and Tipperary on Sunday. Saturday's game, I think it's fair to say that there's a strong favourite to win it. Dublin, 5 in a row. They've seemed unstoppable pretty much for the last 5 years, and but Cavan have come into each game this season as underdogs and surprised quite a few people with how well they've done. So, what chance do you give Cavan on Saturday evening?
It's a hard to know how much of a chance they have. I think they're very, very much up against it. I was actually looking through a few things earlier on, but I think before this year, two of the previous 16 Ulster champions have been in semi-finals. So one of the last 8 Ulster champions, like 1 in 8, so it's a 2 in 16. And no Ulster champion since 2014 has got to an All-Ireland final. I think in 2015, Tyrone Monaghan won it that year. They got stopped by Tyrone actually, and then in 2016 and 17, Tyrone won it, and Mayo and Dublin bet them in both of those years respectively. And then Donegal won the last 2 Ulster championships, and they haven't got to an Ireland semi-final, an Ireland final or semi-final either of those years. So Cavan are very, very much up against it. I think that they have. I don't know, Gerry. It's hard to know. I would have thought Meath would have given Dublin a game. They didn't give it. Look, I'd love to say you think Cavan have a good chance of winning. I'd probably be telling you lies. But just one thing about Cavan is that they've knocked out. Well, they've knocked out 2 Division 1 teams, 1 Division 2 team, as I was saying, down, and then 1 Division 4 team manager. So they've knocked out 2 Division 1 teams, especially like Donegal and Monaghan even. And they played very well against Donegal. They probably need to replicate that performance and maybe add a few more gears if they have any sort of chance of causing an upset. But I was just looking there. Cavan were in 5 Ulster Under 21 finals in a row between 2010 and 2014, and they won 4 of those. It was 4 in a row from 2011 to 2014. So those players should be between 27 and 30, Gerry, all those Cavan players at the moment, so they should be near enough to prime. So they should have enough players to be very, very competitive. I don't think they won any All-Ireland in Under 21, but they won the 4 Ulster titles. So I think they were probably underachieving for a long time. And Mickey Graham came in, he brought that belief. I think what people, probably include myself, kind of forget is that they were in the Ulster final in 2019 as well. So they've brought a bit of consistency to the championship in the last couple of years especially. But I think the target for Cavan here, Gerry, although it won't be said that they're going to win the game, is to do as best they can, but then focus them into Division 3 next year, get back promoted, and their target should be Ulster contenders every year now, and ensure it isn't just a flash in the pan and they go back to maybe not being as strong as they could be.
So if you're sitting in the Cavan dressing room, and you're trying to rile up the players, and you're trying to point to them, what Dublin's weakness might be.
Yeah.
Like, is there one? Where would you think it might be? Like, what do you think Cavan have to target to have a chance?
There probably isn't. I'm going to be honest with you. I think the teams that have been most successful against Dublin have probably targeted the kickouts. Now, it's not fair to say that's a weakness, because Cluxon's probably the best ever person with kickouts in the history of Gaelic football. But whenever Kerry came very close, they tended to squeeze up in the kickouts with an aggressive press. Now, obviously, there's the fear Cavan will be exposed at the back, but I don't think this Dublin team has a weakness necessarily, Gerry, to be honest with you. In terms of all around the pitch, they're very, very strong. And I suppose it would be far easier to pick out maybe a weakness in a Cavan team, but that's not really here nor there either. But I just think that the Dubs in Croke Park, on the show, one thing Dublin always seem to be is consistent, and they don't seem to ever take the foot off the pedal. But I think the only way Dublin are going to win, or Cavan are going to have any chance, is if Dublin really don't perform and Cavan have to up their performance in the Donegal game. I think, Gerry, that Cavan, I do think that they'll be more competitive than people think. I think they'll have a bit of a cut at Dublin. I think if they're in the game at half time, that'll be something to work with. They've nothing to fear as such, in the sense that there's absolutely no pressure on Cavan whatsoever. Like, they've got their Ulster championships, but no, this Dublin team is their 11th successive semi-final in a row. They've been in all the semi-finals every year since 2010. And I do think that they're going to book their place in the Ireland final come Saturday evening.
I think it is important to underline, obviously, like, everyone's looking at this game and it's Cavan and Dublin. Everybody only really sees one winner, probably 31 counties in Ireland. Only sees one winner. There will be some in Cavan that'll fancy their chances and want to spring the surprise. But I think it's important that people, it's not like in a disrespect the Cavan. It's very much this Dublin are they're just so strong. They're so good. It's every credit to them that they've managed to get to this position.
I think, Gerry, purely selfish perspective, an awful lot of people this weekend in the two games would have loved to have seen maybe a Dublin Donegal or Dublin Tyrone and Kerry versus Mayo. Maybe now that's only been from a very, very selfish, neutral perspective, and have it in Tipperary and Cavan are there 100% fully on merit. But I do think if it was Donegal and Dublin or Tyrone and Dublin, even more so Donegal, maybe the way they were going, we'd be thinking it's a blockbuster game. You'd be really and truly looking forward to this game. And also, the players from Tipperary and Mayo would think there's a genuine chance that Dublin could be caught out. And that, I think if Cavan win this game, it'll make the Tipperary and Mayo game very, very interesting. But look, the likelihood is that Dublin are going to win the game. I don't think anyone is expecting otherwise. And I don't know. I'd love to say I'd see Cavan being very competitive and pushing them very close and maybe win the game. But I think Mickey Blaine, the only thing I would say, Gerry, I don't think the Cavan players will need convincing. They're actually having 4 wins on the bounce, and they beat Monaghan and Armagh also in this 2019 championship. So I don't think he'd have any trouble convincing the Cavan players. He's pulled off 2 massive shots before. One was with Mullinyochta in Leinster Club when they won the championship. That was a half parish in Longford. It was the first ever Longford club to win a Leinster Senior Club Championship, and he's also done the same with Cavan winning the Ulster Championship. So I think Mickey Graham is prone to shocking the big teams, and I think the players won't be short of belief. I do think they'll win the game. I think they're going to win quite comfortably, to be honest, Gerry.
Okay, so I think 99% of people will fancy the Dubs to win that one. I think in the other and Sunday semi-final there is again there's a favourite, there's a strong favourite, but it's definitely it's probably rather than 90-10 or 99-1. It's probably more a 60-40 kind of game. Where Mayo will be the favourites to beat Tipperary, but Tip do have some strong players, and again the it was special when they got past Cork in the final on the anniversary of Bloody Sunday. So how do you see what do you think Tip would have to do to beat Mayo?
Well, for Tipperary, just to go back on the first point, Tip absolutely do have a chance of winning this game, and I think Tipperary have some fantastic individual players, like Conor Sweeney, Michael Quinlivan, and Colin O'Riordan. But I think Tipperary were flying into a few years ago, and I don't know, was there a change in policy under it, but they seem to prioritise hurling fully. I don't know if it was an opposite in dual players or what it was, but since then the results in underage football for Tip have gone way, way downhill, and it's not good for the county at all. That's not. And I do think that this Tip team, they had very, very successful underage, maybe from 2010 to 2015 or so, where they would have won Munsters, and All Ireland's actually done All Ireland minor in 2011. But I think, Gerry, that for those Tip players, they will not get a better chance to be in an All Ireland final. Now, I'm not saying they have a good chance of winning an All Ireland, but they have a great chance to get into a final here. But I do think, actually, just going back on what I was saying, Ulster, none of the last, I think since 2000 and not since 2013, has a Connacht champion been in an All-Ireland final. Now, Mayo were in 2 in 16 and 17, but they came through the back door both years. So the Connacht champions haven't been in a final since 2013. So I do think this was Mayo's first title since 2015. I think Mayo are a much better team than people give them credit for. And I do think, Gerry, that if Mayo are to win this game and Dublin do win, that Mayo will have a chance of beating Dublin in the final. I think that from a neutral perspective, look, we'd all love the underdog story, seeing Tip win. But I do think from a neutral perspective, Gerry, a Dublin Mayo final would be very, very attractive, and it would be far more attractive, just say, than a Dublin Tipperary final. Now, I suppose if Cavan do beat Dublin, then the whole thing is blown under the water. But no, I think Tipperary will give it absolutely everything this weekend. I think they'll come close, but I think Mayo will just about come home with the final straight. I'm going to say Mayo by 3 or 4 points. I think Mayo, one more thing before we go from that, Mayo have a tendency to win those knockout games. Now, they're very, very vulnerable in Connacht. They lose a lot of games. But if you look at the record in the qualifiers and in knockout do-or-die games in recent years, it's been very, very good. Now, Dublin and Kerry Dublin have beaten them. Kerry haven't beaten them actually too much, really, but not since 2014 in a do-or-die knockout game. They bet them in last year's championship, but it wasn't knockout. And Kerry bet Mayo in 2017 in the championship. So the only team that's really beaten Mayo that Mayo probably should have beaten in the last maybe 5 years was Kildare in 2018. That was the whole Newbridge or nowhere thing, and that kind of got to Kildare that day. So Mayo have won. They're very good in Croke Park. The record in Croke Park is very good. I think they're going to do the business this weekend, Gerry, and I think we're going to see another Dublin and Mayo final.
I think it'll be quite interesting. Obviously, Cavan and Tipperary historically, have been big successful football counties. Although, like certainly, sort of in my generation, I don't particularly remember a lot of success for either of them. So I think they're certainly like the generation of players. An All Ireland final. For either of those two would obviously be a unique occasion. With regards to Mayo, I think I probably agree with you in that they are probably the team that would have the best chance of beating Dublin in an All Ireland final. Just purely from the fact that you get to an All Ireland final, and sometimes an occasion, there's certain sports teams and players where an occasion will get to them. Where I think Mayo, although there are a lot of players that are younger in this particular panel, they have a lot of players that have been at an All Ireland final and experienced, the pain of defeat in the final. So I think for them, like it would just be a different mentality from the other two. But obviously, if Mayo get past Tipperary, we'll discuss that at the time. But I do agree that they're probably the one that will give Dublin the best game.
Yeah, no doubt. And Dublin would be a very good final. I don't think we can say the same for Tipperary and Dublin, to be honest with you. But look, I suppose it's all hearsay at the moment, Gerry, because we don't know who's going to be in it. But yeah, it's very hard to see too many shocks this weekend, and I'd be surprised if we don't have a Dublin Mayo semi or final. Even I think if there is going to be a shock, it's going to be in the Tipperary and Mayo match. I think Tipperary are probably a better team than people think, but I think Cavan also are better than people are slightly. I think that they're probably not getting enough credit for the 4 wins. And so just before we go, I think this probably shows, Gerry, the bad thing about knockout football in some ways, if it can be a bad thing, in the sense that the other years, usually we get blockbuster games around the semi-final time, like when there's a backdoor. Now, it's much, much harder to knock out the likes of Kerry and Tyrone and Donegal and those teams in Dublin in a backdoor system. Like if Kerry were in the qualifiers this year, you would have thought they would have learned a few lessons and come back an awful lot stronger. Like Mayo were in the qualifiers a few times and came back stronger. But I suppose the good thing about the knockout is it gives teams a chance to win and to cause a shock to underdogs. And maybe the not so good thing is then we mightn't have as many really attractive games later on in the championship, that kind of way. And I suppose if you're looking at it from a revenue point of view, Gerry, like the GAA, this year especially, they would have lost out on a lot of crowds if it was straight knockout, but also they would have lost out, they probably, without being disrespectful, I don't think Cavan and Dublin would draw as big a crowd to Croke Park as Mayo and as Kerry and Dublin or Donegal and Dublin might have done in a knockout match, or maybe as Tipperary and Mayo probably wouldn't have drawn the same as Mayo and Kerry. So we can see, I can see from a competition perspective why they wouldn't be a fan of the knockout approach, Gerry, to be honest with you. I'm a big fan of it, but it does, I suppose, its greatest strength is its greatest weakness in one sense, and that it provides shocks, that kind of way, but also it can lead to maybe us not having the games we crave at this time of the year.
Yeah, well, I think certainly the straight knockout, like realistically, if we were sitting in a normal year and you were looking in the very first round of games there, you had Cork and Kerry, you had Donegal and Tyrone, and ultimately the losers of them, which in the end were Tyrone and Kerry, obviously. But you would have fancied them to still be going, deep into the qualifiers and probably get to the quarterfinals and stuff. But obviously, you can't take away the drama. But I think whenever there's full stadiums again, the GAA will be looking to get as much out of it all as they can. Especially after a year when they, I imagine there's probably been losses, because they're not able to, sell any tickets or whatever. I did see, I think I did see there over the weekend, or the sort of the beginning of the week, that I see confirmation that teams are going to be, the full panels and stuff are going to be allowed in for games now.
Yeah, that's a big the GAA. Disgrace how they were. I think that the reason why they put an extra in a big stadium with loads of empty seats, to be honest with you, like 36 instead of 26 leaving players at home. But look, yeah, they're going to be allowed in now, so thank God a bit of common sense and middle ground was found there.
Yeah, it definitely, it was unfortunate for those that have already, lost out on that. But so I'm not even sure. Was it trying to think of I think we covered all the previous news and stuff, and we've got no hurling this weekend. So obviously we'll be back next week to talk about the Joe McDonagh Cup and the All Ireland final in the hurling. But obviously then for now, my thanks to Conor for coming on and having a chat about the big games this weekend, and hopefully I'm certainly expecting at least one to be a heavy win. But so far we've always said that there's one surprise, so maybe again. But as I say, thanks to Conor and thanks to everybody that's watched, and we'll be back again next week with some reviews on what happened and then previews of the hurling next weekend. So thank you.